All right, here we go. Today we have Erik Prince, founder of private military contractor Blackwater. Welcome to VladTV.
Nice to be here.
I don't think I've ever had anyone like you on the show before. Very interesting story. It's your first time here. I want to start in the beginning. So, you're born and raised in Holland, Michigan.
Yep. Very Dutch community.
And your dad was Erik Prince, who was the founder of Prince Corporation.
Yes, he started in 1965 from scratch.
Right. And this became a major corporation at one point.
It was, he started, well, back up even further. His father died when he was 13 in the Great Depression. So my dad was the head of the home then and had to work, and he worked hard. I was working 40 hours a week in middle school and high school already, and managing a car dealership at age 16. Like, who does that? And I remember he told me he installed the hot water heater at 14.
Oh.
And he literally wasn't sure how, but the guy at the hardware store showed him how to sweat a joint, and we would go and measure each piece of copper tubing and take it there, cut it, get it swaged, and installed it, and it worked. So he learned to work at an early age, put himself through college, worked all through college, was in the Air Force, drafted, did that for a couple of years, and then came back to West Michigan, worked for a tool and die maker. A tool and die is a mold that you use for either stamping or molding or whatever. And he didn't really like, that company made die-cast machines, and it was sold. He didn't really like the new owner, so he started on his own with a wife, 3 kids, a mortgage, and he kind of bet the farm again and went for it in 1965.
Right. And your sister is a former U.S. Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos.
That's right.
Now, this company grew quite a bit, and eventually your dad became a billionaire.
The machinery business struggled, but then in the early 70s, they patented the lighted sun visor, tipped the visor down, the mirror with lights.
Ah, okay.
And that was their patent. And then the digital compass and digital thermometer in your car, they licensed that from NASA.
Wow.
Installed that in cars. And so they kind of rode the wave of outsourcing of automotive stuff and supplied that to Ford, GM, Chrysler, the other big transplants. And that company grew quite large. Yeah, it was 5,000 employees, about $1 billion in sales. And my father died of a heart attack in 95.
Yeah, I'm sorry for your loss.
Yeah, he was a great man. He was truly a rising tide that lifted all boats.
Well, I guess at the time that he died, the CEO of the company said that it would still be a family-owned business, but then a year later, the company sold for $1.2 billion.
We certainly had the intent. My father had actually hired another CEO to kind of take the company onward. And then when my dad died, he didn't really want to take that job without my dad there to mentor and do that transition. And my dad had given 20% of the business to the employees.
Wow, okay.
And so it was one thing, the company had no debt, but it was at a pivot point because it was expected to be not just a domestic supplier, but to do the same thing all over the world, in Europe, in Brazil, in Asia. So putting a lot of debt and a lot of risk on the company was not something my mom really wanted to do. So sold it, and I think that was the right decision at that point.
Well, yeah, by 2016, Forbes said that you guys were the 88th richest family in America with an estimated net worth of $5.4 billion.
No.
That's not true?
That's categorically not true.
Okay. So is that lower than it should be?
If you're conflating that with the DeVos family, but that's not the Prince family.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Okay, so if you kind of mush them together, possibly.
My sister married the son of Richard DeVos.
Yeah.
That's not my family. I mean, DeVosses are great people, but that's
okay. Got
their
it.
family is not our family.
Understood. Okay, so you end up going to the Naval Academy.
I did.
And was that really the plan, to really be have a lifetime career in the military, or were you just sort of unsure at that time?
I'd always wanted to I always wanted to serve in the military. I was a pilot. I soloed when I was 16, got my license when I was 17, planned to be a military pilot. Applied to both Air Force and Navy. I got in at both. I went to Navy. I liked the Navy, but I didn't really like the academy. And so I left after 3 semesters, and I went to Hillsdale College. And it was actually, I remember the spring of my freshman year, plebe year at the Naval Academy. As much as a military geek historian that I was, I didn't really know much of the SEAL teams. And I remember the 2 SEAL liaison officers came and gave the presentation. They said, described what SEAL teams do. And this is in the 80s, where nobody really knew what the SEAL teams did. But they said, if you want to come and PT with us, exercise with us, come to this field the next morning at 5:30. And I showed up. They said, okay, today we're just going to run a mile. Get a partner. Put him on your shoulders. I was hooked.
Okay.
And I left the academy knowing that I wanted to go in the SEAL teams. And so I rolled to Hillsdale College, started right away the next semester, like 2 weeks after I left the academy, and kind of worked to build a resume to get back into OCS, Officer Candidate School, and be a SEAL officer. And that's what I did.
Well, right. So you became a Navy SEAL.
Mm-hmm.
Did the training almost kill you or no?
It was a good program. It's a great program that it makes you reach deep down inside yourself.
Well, being a SEAL, you were deployed in a whole bunch of places. Haiti, the Middle East, the Balkans.
Yep.
You were part of the Yugoslav wars.
Weren't there for much of it, no. But the carrier, we were on a carrier. We were doing combat search and rescue and standby for targeting, that kind of stuff to support the air wing on board the carrier.
I mean, during your deployments as a SEAL, what do you think was the most serious situations that you got into?
Look, that was not a time of combat, not like the post-2001 combat that the military saw. I would say the actuarially, we planned for 50% casualties swimming into Haiti, not because of enemy fire, but because the water was so contaminated. Swimming into Cap Haitian Harbor on the north coast of Haiti, an area of 2.5 million people with no sewage treatment.
Wow.
Normally when you do amphibious reconnaissance, you want to be really low in the water and very, very tactical.
Yeah, not so.
Extra flotation, you don't want the water splashing in your mouth.
That's crazy.
We had so many vaccinations that I couldn't give blood for 5 years after that.
Wow. Okay. Was it during the time that you started thinking about, private training for military personnel and so forth?
The SEAL teams have been using private facilities since the 1970s, really.
Okay.
And we used one in Mississippi. While I was training up for those deployments, and no one had ever done it on an industrial scale. And then kind of seeing the horrible job that the UN peacekeeping forces did, the non-functioning job, and knowing what special operations kind of units needed. When I'd planned to stay for 10, 12 years or so in the Navy, kind of the good years to be a SEAL officer. And then once I was going to be more desk-born, I was going to get out and go work with my dad. But my dad died unexpectedly in 95 of a heart attack, and my wife got cancer a few months later at 29. And so I got out to sort that out, both family business situation and obviously my home situation. And because of my dad's success and knowing what special operations units needed, I knew they needed a training facility. And so that became Blackwater.
Right. Your dad passes away, you leave the military.
I didn't leave early. I just left at the end of my obligation cycle.
Okay, got it. And then you moved to Virginia Beach.
Well, I was stationed there.
You were stationed there?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're already there.
I was stationed on the East Coast, SEAL Team 8.
Okay. So in Virginia Beach, you bought 6,000 acres in the great dismal swamp of North Carolina.
About 3,100 to start.
Okay.
And then added a few pieces to add more buffer.
Okay, and that's where you're formulating Blackwater at that point.
Correct.
Okay, 6,000 acres in that region. How much did that cost you?
The original 3,000 acres cost $900,000.
Okay, good amount of money, but you have tons of land now.
And you wanted extra. You want enough land if you're going to run a training facility and shoot. Well, we ended up shooting 1.2 million rounds a month.
Okay.
You want to have enough buffer that you're sure that no rounds are going to leave the property.
Okay, and the Blackwater name, that came from the bogs that were around?
So the Blackwater property is on the southern end of the Great Dismal Swamp. Actually an area that was originally surveyed by George Washington.
Okay.
Because he was a surveyor. And it is as flat as your kitchen table. And so there's a buildup of probably a meter's worth of organic soil. When the rain comes through that, by the time it makes it to the ditch, the water's black. And we really learned that clearly when we're putting in drainage culverts and in roads, et cetera, and our skin is getting dyed black. And the logo, the bear paw logo with the reticle, actually came from we had to put in about 5 miles worth of power lines. And within days of putting in the power poles, the bears were coming out of the woods and ripping. Oh, yeah. Big bear. The bigger the bear, the higher up he could reach. It was impressive. Big ripping claw marks on those poles, marking their turf.
I mean, if you look at how much money you spent total to just set up Blackwater, how much would you say that was?
The initial investment was about $5 million.
Okay. Was that all your money, or did you get investors?
I was the sole investor.
The sole investor. Okay, so basically the money that came from your dad's business being sold, you reinvested it into Blackwater.
Correct.
Got it. Okay.
That's why I said, because of my dad's success, I was able to do something like that. Because it was an era of bases being closed, ranges being closed. There was a major range facility in America being closed pretty much every week on a base somewhere.
Okay.
So it was definitely counterintuitive. All the smart investment managers said this was a terrible idea.
Okay, so now Blackwater is up and running, and you did $400,000 in revenue the first year.
It's about right. Yes.
But then it started to build up.
We started, it was 400, 800, million two, million six, right? We started with training, and we added targets because we had very destructive customers, and they shredded all the outside systems that we bought. And we had a very, very clever guy that used to manage SEAL Team 6's facility. So we understood state-of-the-art but durable. And so we started selling those targets to federal law enforcement, to military customers, et cetera.
Well, and then you guys got really in the system. From 97 to 2010, you guys were awarded $2 billion in government security contracts.
Yeah.
1.6 billion of it were unclassified federal contracts, and the rest were classified work. Is that accurate?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like 98, 99% of that revenue was competitively bid.
Right.
It's a misnomer. People throw lots of nonsense around to say, well, they were awarded all these sole source contracts. No, It was all competitively bid. You know, at the same time I started Blackwater, I took over the original business my dad started, which was making die-cast machines, which was kind of a family-run tool and die machinery business. And we had to put it through, because of competition, competitive pressures, we had to make it more efficient. And so the Toyota production system with lean thinking, Six Sigma, buying smarter, labor productivity, streamlining the flow, all the things that make a car plant, a semiconductor plant, or in this case, a machinery business, run better and smarter. I kind of took that mentality to Blackwater, and especially as we started with a training facility, and I thought, what does the military do? It recruits, vets, equips, trains, deploys, and supports people. And so building out Blackwater, we built it like a machine to process people to go do a thing somewhere difficult. And so that led us, as that facility, and I was the only one crazy enough, dumb enough, whatever, to build that kind of a facility long before 9/11, knowing what special operations needed. And we had enough space that we could scale. So we had almost industrial capacity as big training contract, big security contract, aviation logistics, construction, disaster response. We had the capability in facilities, in people, in software systems, aircraft to flex and to support customers doing that work.
Well, yeah, you guys became the biggest of the three private security companies that the State Department employed. And at your top, you were making $850 million a year.
I think so. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. I mean,
not
how
making.
Could you become...
That was revenue.
Revenue, not profit. I understand.
Yeah, you said making. That's different. Generating revenue is different than generating profit.
Well, you're grossing $850 million a year.
Accurate statement.
There you go. I mean, if someone wanted to join Blackwater, as a military person, would they need military experience, police experience, or could they just come off the street and get trained by you guys?
Pretty much every one of our contracts had a prerequisite of special operations experience or certain military experience. Obviously, if you're going to be a pilot for us or a mechanic, you need certain qualifications in aircraft or an A&P license for certain type ratings. So there was a lot of prerequisites. We weren't just taking people off the streets. And they would go through, obviously, criminal background check, psych evals, lots of testing and proficiency training and judgment training. So we vetted. The only program that we could take, not somebody just off the street, but where they could have a basic qualification to take them up, we actually had something called the Blackwater Academy, which worked out well for the guys and for the company. And we'd take somebody that had a couple years of military experience, and they're going to go do static security somewhere. And it would be like a 10-week, 12-week course at Blackwater. We would finance them the cost of tuition. And once they're deployed, they're going to get paid $400 a day, and they pay us back $150 a day of that tuition. So they had a great job. We had a great operator that we had vetted and trained, and that worked.
I remember 60 Minutes did a special on you guys, and they said that at one point you guys were the largest private army in the world.
I'd say it's not accurate to call it a private army.
Okay.
Because there's certainly armed security companies in Scandinavia or Canada that had more people, more armed people, more gate guards standing outside of a courthouse or a shopping mall or whatever. So I'd say we had the largest concentration of former special operations people, yes. And I am proud to say I was the largest employer of former special operations people, and what a magnificent cast of people that was.
I mean, how many people did you have at the height of Blackwater employed?
Deployed, about 3,000, 3,500.
Got it. Right. And you guys were involved in the Afghanistan invasion, and the Iraqi war?
Not in the invasion.
No.
We were there. We started in Afghanistan in May of 2002.
Okay. So after the invasion.
Correct.
Okay. Well, like I said, you guys were deployed in Iraq, and a very serious situation happened in 2007, which is known as the Nisour Square massacre.
Yep.
So I read into the situation. So a car bomb ended up exploding near the compound where a bunch of U.S. and Iraqi officials were meeting. And you guys sent a 19-man technical support team, 4 convoy trucks, called Raven 23. They were supposed to stay in the safe zone, but the commander, Jimmy Watson, actually went into the actual square. Is this part accurate?
Well, there was a car bomb that went off outside of a building where there was a USAID official that we were protecting. Mm-hmm. And typically after an event like that, it's called hardpoint. You just stay there. But because all the Iraqi guards fled the area, that team decided to move. And when you're gonna move through a dangerous area of Baghdad, and of course the State Department mandated that we move the VIPs, the protectees, in armored Suburbans, lights and sirens, very obvious where that target is. I will note that if we were doing security work for a corporate customer or an NGO, we used very indigenous-looking vehicles, and we never had any shootouts for those because you can't kill what you can't see. But the State Department mandated you must drive a Suburban with lights and sirens. It's an image thing. Okay. And so that team decided to move off that X, and you put a support team into a traffic circle because if you're, are you a deer hunter at all?
No.
Okay. Well, if you're ever hunting deer, you hunt a trail intersection because that's the place to ambush them. In the same way, if you're going to kill Americans, you hunt these big traffic circles because that's the place to ambush them. So a support team would go and clear that traffic circle and make it so that the team could flow through there quickly and hopefully avoid that ambush. And while they're there, Raven 23 is in this traffic circle. Mm-hmm. They'd actually got in a briefing that morning to be on the lookout for a white Kia, which was likely a car bomb. One of the vehicles that didn't stop, in fact, the only vehicle that didn't stop was a white Kia. And the guys engaged it. Turns out it was not a car bomb. It was a male and female, a female and I think her son.
Exactly, yeah. It was a mother and her adult son.
Yes.
The adult son, I believe, was a driver.
Correct. Again, the only car that didn't stop for the traffic circle, it was engaged, and that kicked off a much bigger firefight with a lot of Iraqis shooting at the support vehicles. One of those incoming rounds severed the radiator hose on the State Department vehicle, which caused all the coolant to drain out of the engine. And when you have no coolant in an engine, those modern Caterpillar engines shuts down. So now the vehicle is disabled in this traffic circle, taking incoming fire. And they had to stop and rig the tow before they could drag it out of there. And that's how that tragic event happened.
Right. Well, eventually, prosecutors argued that Raven 23 did not face hostile gunfire when they began shooting. This came out in court. And after the car was shot up, the driver was killed, and then they came in and killed the passenger, which was the mother. They threw a grenade and blew the car up.
No, they wouldn't. No, they didn't throw a grenade. There was a 40 millimeter grenade fired at the vehicle to stop the vehicle.
Okay, got it. Because then they said that Raven 23 set off stun grenades to clear the scene, but then the Iraqi police and soldiers thought they were actual grenades, and then fire began to go in both directions.
The best analysis of this is done by Sean Ryan. He does a long interview with the guys from Raven 23 and take you through the blow by blow. The sad thing is the DOJ had to come at them, I think, 4 times to finally get a prosecution, a conviction.
Well, right. After the dust settled, 17 Iraqi citizens.
Not accurate.
No?
It was 11.
11 Iraqi citizens were killed.
Yeah. The company hired the prosecutor, the Iraqi prosecutor that prosecuted Saddam Hussein, to go meet with all the families. There was only 11.
Okay. And they're saying,
look, 11, 17, still tragic.
Still tragic.
Yes.
Right.
But it's 11. The media throws around 17, not accurate.
Right. I heard 14 once. I heard 17.
11.
20 wounded. Is that accurate?
I don't know about the wounded count because there was a lot of people showing up at hospitals with AK wounds. Our guys would not have been firing an AK. AK-47 fires a very distinctive round from a round that an American would have been carrying.
Well, at one point during the firefight, a Blackwater helicopter showed up. And people that were there say that the helicopter fired into the crowd as well. There was actually like a bullet hole in one of the roofs of the car. Blackwater said that it never happened.
Yeah, they log the rounds fired, the round counts. So they would have counted rounds at the end of that mission, and if there was full round count, that would have been accurate.
I mean, regardless of the exact details, this was a train wreck.
Anytime you have a war zone, accidents can happen. Absolutely. Yeah. And to give perspective on that week prior in Baghdad, it was not all peace, love, and happiness. We had a helicopter shot down with, I think, 7 guys on board. They survived. We had another convoy on the Baghdad highway, not far from where this incident happened, that put guys in the hospital. Again, explosive ambush initiated against the vehicles, put guys in the hospital. So yeah, it was a dangerous place. The center of gravity of that Iraq fight was in Baghdad. And so trying to do diplomatic security, moving civilians around to have interaction with Iraqi government officials in the midst of a combat zone is hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. We did 100,000 missions between Iraq and Afghanistan, 100,000 protective missions. No one under our care was ever killed or injured. 41 Blackwater personnel died doing that work.
Wow.
So war is a tragedy.
Yeah.
And people are right to be upset at the loss of innocent civilians. Do you know how many civilians have been killed in Iraq since then?
Thousands?
85,000.
Yeah.
85,000. Do you know who's responsible for the nonsense in Iraq?
Who's that?
The Iranians.
Oh, really?
In 2004, here's the thing. When you look back in history, there has always been major enmity between Iraq and Iran. Mm-hmm. Iran, the Persian Empire, wants to rule the whole place. Still do.
Yeah.
You're seeing that played out in Lebanon today with the Iranians sponsoring the Houthis in Yemen and even their support for Hamas in Gaza. So Shia Iran versus largely then Sunni Iraq run by Saddam Hussein. Huge war, Iran-Iraq war. When the U.S. toppled Saddam Hussein, Iran went out of their way to subjugate Iraq. I remember, because I was there, in 2004, the chief of Iraqi intelligence, a guy named Mohammed Shawani, came to see me with his agency CIA handler and said, we're seeing all kinds of evidence of the Iranians setting up the same kind of tentacles like they've done in Lebanon with Hezbollah. Political offices, assassination teams, heavy influence operation. And he said, we want a program to find them and to wipe them out, to stop the Iranians from controlling Iraqi society. We priced it up. CIA was going to pay for it. Blocked by Condoleezza Rice. No, Iran is not our enemy. We have to respect the political process. That was a single dumb pivot move in Iraq, because if we had severed and prevented the Iranians from getting their hooks into Iraq, Iraq would be a truly free and I would say much more prosperous society today. But now, look at, you hear about the drones and missiles and rocket fire that attack U.S. troops while they're in Iraq. Do you know where that comes from? The Hashd-e-Shabi. Okay, it's called the Popular Mobilization Units, which are Iranian-controlled, literally Iranian officers, a Hezbollah-like army inside of Iraq that the Iraqi government has really no power over. And in Iran decides who the Iraqi prime minister is going to be and who those cabinet ministers are. So the U.S., for all the blood and treasure and effort in Iraq, just turned over Iraq to the Iranians, not even to Iraqi sovereignty. It's a real tragedy.
Crazy. Well, the 4 people involved in the shooting that happened in Iraq, 3 were convicted of manslaughter and 1 convicted of murder. But then later on in 2020, Trump pardoned all 4 of them.
That's right.
What was the what was the meaning behind the pardon? How did that actually happen?
Since they'd been through the DOJ, very much stimulated by the Biden administration, by first Obama and Joe Biden, were hell-bent to get a conviction somehow. And the first time the case was thrown out for prosecutorial misconduct. And then they came back and tried him again, mistrial. And then they came back again and basically overtried him. And again, if you're trying, again, they, instead of trying them in their home states, they brought them all to Washington, D.C., to the center of the swamp, okay? I'm sorry, if you're from Idaho or Montana or Wyoming or Colorado or Texas, Washington, D.C. is not a jury of your peers. That's an alien, different set of people. And even then, after weeks and weeks of deliberation, the jury finally convicted them. And in fact, The first conviction was so disgusting because they tacked on an extra 30 years to their sentence. Why? Because they used automatic weapons in the commission of their crime, ignoring the fact that those automatic weapons were issued to them by the State Department and as a required piece of gear for them to do their job.
Wow. Okay.
It shows how bad prosecutors and the judge, truly permanent members of the swamp, were in this case, and it was not justice at all.
But ultimately, they were pardoned.
They were pardoned.
I think the main guy ended up doing like 6 years.
They all did. They were all
sentenced at the same time, right? So they did about 6 years, but then they all got out. And they got all their rights restored. They could own guns, they could vote, everything else like that because of the pardon.
Yep. They're living their lives and productive citizens. One of them taught himself biblical Greek while he was in prison. They said the guards, when they would close their cells at night, said, "Man, it is hard for me to do this because you don't belong in here." And none of them joined a gang. None of them did anything. They actually did a lot of education and mentoring other prisoners, even teaching other guys how to read. So I'm extremely proud of how the guys conducted themselves and how they're living now.
Well, by 2010, you ended up selling Blackwater.
Yep.
Was it a huge profit?
No. The business, it generated a lot of revenue. It was a very efficient operation. It made money. I plowed pretty much every dollar back into the business. And on the aviation side, we bought an air operation in 2003 in the spring. 1 leased aircraft and 6 guys as part of the business. And 6 years later, we had 73 aircraft that we owned and operated for the U.S. government, operating in difficult places, multiple aircraft shot down in combat. And the lawfare, political assault from all aspects of the federal government. For 2 years, I was spending about $2.5 million a month in legal fees.
2.5 a month.
Oh,
wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was disgusting. It was all, look, the ATF, Customs, the Department of Agriculture came at us as how we were shipping dog food to Iraq. Just every kind of proctology, a blizzard of subpoenas. And, we'd planned to train U.S. military special operations and conduct and do very difficult missions abroad to serve our country, not planning on that kind of bureaucratic assault by the government. So yeah, I'm a little raw about that yet.
Right. So you just wanted to get out of it at that point.
Yeah. And sold the business for a fraction of what it had been worth 2 years before.
Do you think the massacre is what kind of caused all the problems and all the media problems that ultimately caused the business to drop in value?
I think that was the excuse, but the fact is we operated extremely efficiently. We did things for a fraction of what the government required it to do. We got pulled into stuff that we never planned on doing, and we answered the call. I mean, after Hurricane Katrina happened in the Gulf Coast, we had just taken delivery of a helicopter for one of the overseas jobs, and it was in the States. And I said, "Hey, as soon as the pilots reset, just start flying to Louisiana, and we'll figure it out." And sure enough, one of the guys in our class, in our company, was in a Harvard Business School class with a senior guy from the Coast Guard. So our aircraft, November 505, became Coast Guard 505 by the time it arrived in Louisiana, and we ended up evacuating hundreds of people, 128 people. And then private sector started calling for help. And so we've been there for probably 2 weeks. And to be clear, we did not take anyone's guns away at all. When our guys got to the French Quarter in New Orleans, and we beat the Louisiana National Guard from 5 states away, beat them to the scene.
Yeah.
There were dead bodies in the streets, not from us, not from the storm, from looters. It was chaos. There'd been 13 Walmarts picked clean. We got hired to protect the Walmart distribution center, for example. But then the FEMA came to us and said, "We need help," because they went to the Federal Protective Service, part of DHS, and asked for hundreds of police officers. And they said, their employee union said, "No, the conditions are too rough and too unsafe. We're not going to go." So FEMA asked us. And we went. So again, no drama, capable people answering the call. We didn't really send a lot of military guys. We sent mostly law enforcement people. Mm-hmm. And because we sent the right people with the right logistic support, it worked, and we were there for probably a year. So that's the kind of company and attitude of moving to the sound of the need, urgently.
Well, after you sold Blackwater, you actually got hired by the Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi, and you moved to the United Arab Emirates, and you actually set up an 800-person battalion of foreign troops to essentially create security out there?
Well, no, the main reason I moved to UAE was because of piracy.
Okay.
Somali piracy, which was raging then. And there was 80 to 90 ships taken per year. And they'd sit on these ships for 6 months to a year waiting for the ransoms to get paid. And so we ended up building a counter-piracy police force to basically go after the pirate logistics. Built it with and through the local government, and that worked. That unit went active in 2011. By 2012, you don't hear about Somali piracy anymore. That worked, and the program cost less than what the pirates were taking in ransom per year. Huh. It was a great exercise in how to do this cheaply and practically, and actually, because you have to do boots on the ground. The U.S. Navy, the Europeans, the EU, they were cruising all over the Indian Ocean chasing pirates. Dumb. If you have a wasp problem in your yard, you don't chase them around the yard with a spray can. You go to the nest and you deal with the nest. It didn't take a genius to figure out where the pirates were in Somalia, because you could fly along the coast in a turboprop aircraft and say, there's a 1,000-foot ship anchored a mile off that tiny village. Probably pirates there.
Okay, so you actually went after the pirates where they stayed.
Sure. Because for the pirates, it was a business. They'd actually have a team that would go in a boat way out to sea, 1,000 miles off, grab a ship, take it back, and they would switch to the B team, which would be the guards, sitting on that vessel, waiting for the ransom to get paid. So the police force just basically went after anybody that was supporting those guards guarding that ship. I mean, if a pirate grabs a ship off the coast of Oman and they go to get resupplied in Oman, the police are going to come and arrest them. That's all the Puntland Marine Police Force did. They provided a level of law enforcement reach for the local government to extend sovereignty along their shore. We actually made a movie. It's called the Somalia Project, a documentary about that effort. And it actually won, I think, in the Soho. There's a film festival here in New York, and it won an award there.
Nice.
It's still on YouTube. People should watch it. My favorite part of that movie is there's an interview of this kid, probably late 20s, Indian kid. And he said he was describing being held hostage for a year. Engineer had been beaten to death. Another guy had his ear cut off. He said, one day we heard shooting. And we heard a lot of shooting. And then we heard a helicopter. And we knew someone had finally come to rescue us. And there's a great scene where they get rescued and they come to shore, and there's 25 extremely bedraggled dudes. And they're kissing the ground, they're praying. He said, we prayed to God, and God sent the PMPF. And I thought, because we caught all kinds of shit for the audacity of building a police force to go after piracy. The UN called the program illegal. The State Department, the idiots in Washington, were doing all they could to block it. That's what ended piracy.
Right. I remember at one point, Obama, I think, sent a team of SEALs that killed Somalian pirates as they were attacking a ship. And I remember the Somalians were so outraged. They're like, this is so unfair.
The Maersk,
we
Alabama.
just steal, we don't kill. And it's like, you look at this going like, come on, you go and attack.
I think that was the Maersk, Alabama.
Yeah, you know what
and
I'm
they rescued
about.
Captain Phillips. Sure. That rescue operation probably cost as much as our police force did for a year.
Okay.
Because they flew the entire assault team from Dev Group and boats and ships out there and blah. Great.
Yeah.
So great flex. The U.S. military can do that.
They proved a point.
They proved a point.
Yeah.
But very costly.
Yeah. So at what point did you actually meet Trump?
I met him one time during the 2016 campaign in his office for like 10 seconds. Literally poked my head in. He was on a conference call, shook his hand, and that was it. And that's the only time I met Trump until I saw him in 2019 at a veterans event. And he came up to me and he said, Erik, you were right. I should have listened to you on Afghanistan.
What, didn't you offer to take over the war in Afghanistan for $5 billion?
Not quite that simple.
You know what I'm talking about, though, right?
Sure. So I'd been paying attention to Afghanistan, obviously, and what a freaking failure it was. An Office of Circumlocution fail. We'd been through 19 commanders in 20 years, 32 different troop rotations, right? So to say we weren't in Afghanistan as a country for 20 years, we were there for 30 troop rotations, and it's extremely disjointed. And so Steve Bannon, policy advisor at the White House then, came to me and he said, and this is like in April of 2017, he said, Afghan policy is going to be debated. Write an op-ed. So I wrote an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal and making a case for a much smaller footprint, a stay-behind capacity, basically a skeletal structure capacity that could be contracted. Why? To address the issues of 30 different rotations. And so that op-ed stimulated some discussion at the White House, definitely blocked by the legacy swamp. Mattis, 4-star general, now SecDef, so really acting like a 5-star. McMaster, who is a serving armor officer as National Security Advisor, who really wanted his 4th star. They hated any idea that was not completely Pentagon. And so that plan that I laid out basically would have, and at that point there was 29,000 contractors in country already. So this is not an expansion of contractors. This was a reduction of everything.
Yeah.
And I said we could do this, a stay-behind capacity of 6,000. And it would have been, there was 91 battalions. I would have put a 36-man mentor team with each of them. Live with, train with, fight with. But because they're contractors, I can pay them to go in for 90 days, home for 30, back in, and keep that same mentor with the same unit for years. Afghans want to know who's next to them. Is it a brotherhood of arms or is it a revolving door? Because that's all 30 different troop rotations was. And with the U.S. lives on one base and the Afghans live on another base, didn't have that kind of connectivity. So reliable mentors that would train and fight, eat the same chow, ride in the same vehicles. 2, reliable air support. When the Afghan forces, and this was a pervasive problem, the Afghan Air Force never was really fully effective because trying to take an illiterate population, 90% illiterate, making them to fly a sophisticated aircraft and maintain it, anybody that was qualified ended up getting hired by airlines. So they would wait 7 to 10 hours for air support. You're calling, I'm in a firefight, come help me now. 7 to 10 hours, not cutting it. Base after base would be surrounded by the Taliban. Just a simple siege. So bad that the base commander would be calling back to Tullow News, the news program in Kabul, like a call-in show saying, I'm at a base, help me, we're going to die. And nobody did a damn thing about it. Again and again and again. 3, reliable combat logistics. Make sure the men are paid on time, fed on time, that they have adequate fuel, batteries, munitions. All the areas of pervasive corruption, not hard to control. And most important, and also importantly, medevac. Because if you're an Afghan soldier, you are 8 times as likely to die as a Westerner that gets wounded. Men will fight harder if they know someone gives a shit about them. So that would have cost $3.5 billion. Less than 5% of what the U.S. was spending per year.
There you have it.
Less than 5%.
Yep.
Pentagon doesn't like that math. So instead, they do it pull out, you leave tens of billions of dollars of military equipment, which is now in the hands of Taliban and everywhere else. Congress appropriated $14 billion to resettle Afghan refugees, most of them unvetted. I will debate anybody, anywhere on the merits of my plan because it was not theoretical. We had done lots of training, lots of aviation, medevac, logistics, all the rest, operating there cheaply, effectively. I mean, here's the thing. The U.S. government was paying $250 a gallon for fuel by the time it gets to where it gets put into a Humvee or a vehicle. Why? The fuel they were buying, all the diesel fuel, all the gasoline, was imported, Defense Logistics Agency contract, to Karachi, trucked from Karachi, Pakistan, the port, up into Afghanistan. About a third of the Taliban's operating budget was tolling that fuel.
Huh.
Okay, so the Taliban's operating budget was about $600 million a year. A third in fuel tolls, a third in drugs, and a third tolling illegal mining. There was a huge oil field that had been drilled and proven during the Soviet times in the 80s called Amudarya oil field. Drilled, know it's there, 5 wells, capped properly. For $20 million, you could have drilled expansion wells, powered the entire country, $150 million. You put a modular refinery there, you have enough jet fuel, diesel, and gasoline, and enough HFO to power the entire country. This is not rocket science, but it's generals that don't understand math and don't understand business. They're thinking about only controlling some geographic battle space. It's too bad. It's really too bad. We could have done so much better there as a country. There was a lot of effort, but not very productive effort. And I really feel bad for veterans that lost friends, limbs, spouses, mental health, to have it pissed away by politicians. And Trump tried to engage, but he never really, his national security apparatus then was very much part of the problem.
Well, you got tied into the whole Trump-Russia investigation. There was a controversial secret meeting that happened in Seychelles. Am I pronouncing it right?
Seychelles,
which was a small island chained in the Indian Ocean. There was a Russian banker named Kirill Dmitriev, who was the executive of the state-run Russian Direct Investment Fund and also a Putin ally. They're saying that you had secret meetings with him on Trump's behalf.
No. Categorically no.
Okay.
And it's funny how the leftist media and idiots in Congress really spin nonsense because they say, well, you went there to to create a back channel to the Russians before the election.
Yeah.
This meeting happened in January, 2 months after the U.S. election. Okay, I went there to see Emirati leadership. So was that guy, because the Emiratis are investors in some Russian investment funds. And they said, hey, you should meet that guy while you're here. I had a beer with him. Doesn't take me long. I think I had 2. It doesn't take me long to drink 2 beers. And that was it. No contact before and no contact after. So right. It's amazing how, and I'll take real issue with the illegal weaponization of intercepts, because the Obama administration, because they're still in the office while this happens, this is like early January before the inauguration, and so they're unmasking American citizen in a private meeting. I'm not in the Trump campaign. I'm not in the Trump transition at all. I'm an American citizen in a meeting, and they unmask me illegally. And that's bullshit. And the weaponization and the abuse of the national security apparatus by the Democrat Party is unconscionable. It's repeated, and it must stop.
I mean, because of your position as the former head of Blackwater and all the things you're involved in, I mean, have there ever been attempts on your life, or is there a price on your head? I mean, do you need security everywhere you go?
I've been warned multiple times by the FBI that I'm on the Al-Qaeda hit list, and I'm on the Iranian hit list.
Okay.
So, yeah.
No attempts, though?
Not that I'll acknowledge.
Okay. Well, around this time, your sister, Betsy DeVos, becomes the Secretary of Education under Trump.
Yep.
There was a report that happened in 2020 that said that you were recruiting former spies to infiltrate a liberal group that was opposing Trump.
No, there was a newspaper article that was talking about Project Veritas.
Okay.
They wanted a training area. Family has a ranch out in Wyoming. They used it as a training area. I was not involved in the training. That's it.
Right. There was also an investigation that happened with the Rolling Stone and New York Times based on internal United Nations report that claimed that you had connections between you and a Libyan warlord, Khalifa Haftar, in an attempt to overthrow the UN-backed government in Libya?
Well, I've never met this Khalifa Haftar, ever.
You know what I'm talking about, though.
Oh, yeah. Look, I'm aware of lots of bullshit that the UN spews and you know, particularly annoyed at the UN because we're in New York right now and the traffic is even more screwed up because of this idiot General Assembly. Mm-hmm. I can't think of a more failed globalist institution than the UN because it is just a large grift of money-making wastage of international diplomats to feel good about themselves while doing actual harm all over the world. Name one place that there's been UN peacekeepers that they've actually made the situation significantly better.
Yeah, I feel you.
And when you say, and it's funny when you talk about Libya, the UN recognized government, the UN recognized government was supposed to be for a 1-year period starting in 2013.
After Gaddafi got killed?
2013.
Yeah.
11 years ago.
Yeah, they're still there.
The place is so screwed up because of the UN and just incompetence that we're now 11 years past. So it's all just a joke.
Well, after the election, Trump starts the whole stop the steal rhetoric. And then on January 6th, the Capitol attack happened. When you saw that, considering your relationship with Trump, what did you think?
Well, the way you say that is quite misleading.
Okay. I mean, you do have some sort of, you donated money.
I donated money to the campaign.
Yeah, exactly. $250,000, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm. I had my picture taken with him once.
Okay.
I saw him once.
Right.
For 15 seconds before during the campaign or during the 2016 campaign.
Right, but your sister is the Secretary of Education, right? There is a connection. I'm not saying that you guys are best friends.
That's her business. But don't go down the road of idiot conspiracies. I hope you're smarter than that.
I feel you. But there is some level of relationship. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying you guys play golf together every Tuesday. I'm saying there's some connection between the two. I don't play golf. It's too bad. It's a good sport.
But here's the thing. Yeah. So she's there doing the education thing, mm-hmm. not taking a salary, not getting reimbursed for any travel expenses. She is truly there serving as the education secretary.
Which is great.
But yeah, you guys go down some weird-ass rabbit trails, and I'm going to call you on it because that's bullshit.
No, that's fine.
And leave this in the tape.
No, I'm going to leave it in. You don't have a real relationship with him. You have some association with him. I think that's a fair statement.
I respect him trying to serve America, and he knows who I am. Absolutely.
What did you think of the January 6th uprising?
It is not an insurrection. It would be the first insurrection in history where people were unarmed in a country that has 150, 200 million personally owned firearms. Mm-hmm. So it is a gross distortion to call it an insurrection. Are people right to be pissed about elections being stolen? Absolutely. Are people right to be questioning why $400 million went from Zuckerberg into 5 specific counties to affect how and when votes were counted in swing states? To question that? When you look at the actual voter turnout in the 2020 election, we never really get, historically, we never get much above 65% voter turnout. If you believe that all those people voted in 2020 to be at 92% voter turnout, that smells a lot, especially when on Australia, when they fine you for not voting, they never get above an 82% voter turnout. So if it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, my friend, you're looking at a duck.
So you feel the election was stolen?
I feel there was definitely some nonsense around the election in certain swing states. Absolutely.
Well, your own sister, though, she resigns right after, January 7th. She said there's no mistaking the impact that Trump's rhetoric had on the situation. And she...
that's even a mischaracterization. Yes, she resigned. I don't disagree with that. But Trump said in his speech peacefully protest.
It is what it is. Did you talk to her about resigning?
No.
Okay, so you guys never had that conversation.
I was out west, on the West Coast when that happened.
Well, in 2022, Russia invades Ukraine.
Yep.
And part of their military setup is the Wagner Group. Did you ever interact with the Wagner boss, Yevgeny Prigozhin?
Never met him.
Never met him.
Never met him, never spoke to him, and clearly never made any offers of support or service to the Wagner Group.
Okay.
Again,
I'm not implying that, by the way. I'm just asking in general.
But some left-wing assholes have.
I've never even heard that. I'm not getting at that.
But I will say,
go ahead.
The Russians pitched me in 2012 while I lived in the UAE, and I was invited. I went to Moscow. I remember this was during the reset. It was before they invaded Ukraine in the Donbass in Crimea in 2014. So in 2012, I went to Moscow, met with senior people, never met Putin. And they said, please come and build a Blackwater here. Provide you the land, build a training facility that would employ veterans, all the rest. I said, thanks, but I can't do that.
Would that have been legal?
No.
Okay, yeah, because I think the U.S. would have had an issue with that.
But they were looking for how to build a private sector capability, and obviously Wagner filled that void. I would argue I would have built a much better Wagner.
Okay, because at one point Wagner actually turned around and attacked Russia and rolled his tanks into. I mean, I think they got close to Moscow at one point.
There is certain reporting about that, but again, I don't know. All is not as it may appear in Russia.
I'm sure it is. I'm sure it's not, because 2 months later, the Wagner boss ends up getting killed in a plane crash.
And not just it blew up in air.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you think that was an accident?
No, of course not.
Just checking. You know what I'm saying? Just checking. So you think that Putin engineered that as a retaliation?
I think there's almost like a gang, right? You have a gang boss and you have different rival factions. And that was definitely the military intelligence or the FSB pushing back on a force that had been rivaling or challenging their positions. Again, I don't know the details, but that's what I suspect.
I mean, when you look at the whole Ukraine-Russia conflict and the billions of dollars that have been spent, and
hundreds of billions,
and full disclosure, I was born in Kiev, Ukraine.
Okay.
At the time, I was part of the USSR, so
Yep.
I consider myself Russian, but technically I was born in Ukraine. I mean, in the beginning, I was very supportive of the whole situation, but now, years later, and I've always said this, I don't think that the Ukraine could withstand Russia forever.
Nope.
The U.S. have been propping it up with billions of dollars, but at some point, it's going to...
It's a math problem.
It's a math problem, exactly.
When you fight a war of attrition against someone that's 3 and 4 times the size of you, you're going to lose that fight. The sad thing is, I quietly offered a solution that I think would have prevented that war.
Which was?
I had a pretty good idea that the Russians were going to invade, certain indications and warnings. Mm-hmm. And so in December of 2021, 3 months before they invaded, I sent a paper up through a senior DOD contact without my name on it, so they can't play the I Hate Erik Prince card. Because already slated in 2022, the U.S. Air Force was retiring 206 combat aircraft. 140 of those, like 50 F-15s, 50 F-16s, 40-some A-10s. A-10 being the best purpose-built tank-killing aircraft ever made. They were already planning to retire those, so fly them from an active combat squadron, fly it to the desert, to the boneyard, park it for all eternity, written off to zero value. Biden could have done 2 things. Announce, of course, Ukraine is not going to be part of NATO. We'll stop that provocation. But B, they're going to have the means to defend themselves. There's 3 squadrons, a significant air wing of deterrence, and you can fly it with contractor pilots for a year until the Ukrainian pilots are trained, 150 combat aircraft in Ukrainian markings showing up in January of 2022, no way they would have invaded. And that whole program, since the aircraft were already written down to zero, $100 million in fuel, $100 million in wages, $300 million in old weapon systems. Again, clear out the old back end of the garage. And yeah, so the Russians have a high air defense network. Fine. You have 150 aircraft. That's what ejection seats are for. Fight. It would have caused the Russians to not do it, especially if the U.S. had backed off on the stupid, unnecessary provocation of saying Ukraine needs to be part of NATO.
Well, you actually said that the U.S. should make peace with Russia and pull them away from China, because you said China is actually the biggest threat to the U.S.
Yeah, look, it's been the long-standing goal of U.S. foreign policy to keep German industry from combining with Russian industry or with Russian resources. All we've done now with this stupid Ukraine thing is push Russia and all those resources, gas, minerals, coal, everything, into a subjugated role of the Chinese Communist Party. That is not in our strategic interest at all.
I mean, you think that eventually...
Russian economy is stronger now than it was. They have made their economy pretty much sanction-proof. They're selling all the oil that they want to sell to India, to the rest of the BRICS nations. The petrodollar, right, our entire way of life, and the reason that Congress can appropriate massive budget deficits every year is because of the petrodollar, because of the dollar being the world's reserve currency. By pushing Russia and China and India away from the trade and the dollar, that's bad. That's
Saudi
very,
Arabia
very dangerous.
Also, I think.
Say again?
Saudi Arabia also.
Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, as someone who was born in Russia and is now 51 years old, I've never seen a peaceful relationship between Russia and America, ever. I mean, there's been some times, you know. Look,
I'm not saying they're not going to be our besties.
Yeah.
Fine, but we can they can be frenemies even. We don't have to be as confrontational. Look, after 9/11, the Russians opened up. They were very helpful with intelligence. They were very helpful with logistics support, flying stuff, weapons, aircraft, combat aircraft, through their airspace and through their periphery into Uzbekistan, a big air refueling base in Kyrgyzstan. That is not somebody that's trying to be an enemy to us. I think this neocon, I wrote a big article in 1776 Journal. It was called Too Big to Win. And it details 30 years of neocon failure and why we're having so many problems as a country in foreign policy. And one of those is we did not have to be nearly as confrontational to Russia. And instead of embarrassing them in the 90s, we could have really embraced them and helped them down the road of capitalism instead of the kind of the gangster capitalism they have now.
I mean, do you think there'll ever be like an actual full-blown conflict with China? You know, because I remember at one point, China was predicted to be the #1 world economy, but then they had their own set of problems and so forth. But there have been a lot of...
A conflict with China is exceedingly more dangerous if the Russians are on their side.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
And the Russians, long-term, culturally, we have a way more in common with Russia than we do with China or India or Japan or Korea. Russia really belongs in the orbit and the friendly association of Europe, not with Asia. And even demographically, Russia is hurting. They need more people. They are extremely sensitive about the Chinese expansion into Russian territories. So like when the Chinese do a big infrastructure project in Africa, in a lot of cases they'll use convict Chinese slave labor because there's 40 million males of marriage age in China with no prospects of marrying a Chinese female. Why? Sex selection abortion. Went on for a single child policy and a preference to have male babies, not female babies.
Right.
You have a math problem. So they send criminals and a lot of people going abroad, Chinese slow scenification of Eastern Russia is a big problem for them as well.
Well, the Trump assassination attempt, you've talked about this.
Which one?
The first one, where he actually got hit.
Yep.
You said that was a total breakdown in terms of security.
Terrible.
What do you think was the biggest problem?
Well, when you're doing advanced work, you want to secure your perimeter and secure that out to at least 1,000 meters. 1,000 meters, because that's how far someone good with a sniper rifle can shoot. Leaving buildings that were only 140 yards away, unwatched and unguarded. Now, part of that is a failure of local police, but not having enough Secret Service advance to making sure that local police were doing their job. Ultimately, the responsibility flows uphill to the Secret Service for not having advanced people, not having counter-surveillance people, and I would say a lack of seriousness by the Secret Service in doing their job. I mean, the fact that Jill Biden, president's wife, has no constitutional authority. She was doing an event nearby in Pittsburgh. They had 3 times as many agents on her as on Trump.
Well, yeah, but Trump is not actually an active president. He's a former president. So he's not going to get the same type of security.
He's a former president and the nominee of the party.
I understand, but also a nominee, not an actual sitting president. So that's what people are saying is the big difference.
Okay. The spouse of the sitting president who has no constitutional role gets 3 times as many Secret Service?
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Come on.
Yeah.
This is the same Jill Biden that for the first time in since 1776, that the Marine Band, the Marine Band plays Hail to the Chief when the president arrives in a room. Jill Biden had the Marine Band generate a new set of music just for her when she walks on. Who does that?
Okay. Well, the whole Hamas-Israel conflict. Recently, there was a report that pagers and walkie-talkies exploded on the Hamas side.
No, Hezbollah side.
On the Hezbollah side, my bad. That they said Israel was behind. As someone who has a computer science degree that's taken some electronics courses and so forth, I don't see how this is humanly possible unless they actually put some sort of explosive device in these walkie-talkies ahead of time.
You have to hack the supply chain.
Okay, so I was right. You can't someone can't take my existing cell phone and blow it up in my ear.
Yeah, you can't. I don't think you can get it to thermal runaway to have that amount of discharge. There was definitely some kind of strip explosive added to the battery pack somehow in that supply chain. That is a long-running, highly sophisticated effort that they accomplished, and I applaud them for doing it. I mean, my God, it's the ultimate in targeted attack to clack off 2,700 of Hezbollah leadership. And it's self-selected because they weren't just random pagers given to anybody. There was an encrypted pager specifically purchased for Hezbollah, by Hezbollah. And I wish the CIA was capable of that. I wish they were that innovative and willing to take risks to do that kind of operation. Alas, they are not.
Well, you actually said that China could do the same thing to the U.S. because of their grip on the global supply chain.
So in the case of getting after 2,700 pagers, an intelligence service had to figure out to stimulate that demand, to find the supplier, to replace and manufacture the battery plus explosive plus an initiating device in that. The fact is, every iPhone made in China. Enormous amount of batteries for everything made in China. Or full products made in China, from circuitry, operators, everything made in China. It's something we need to be very, very mindful of.
So you're saying that hypothetically China could do the same thing?
Absolutely.
Wow. Well, you talked about how defense contractors buy lobbyists and politicians to land defense contracts, and you actually compare it to how the cartels work.
Look, they pay an enormous amount of money to almost a brigade worth of lobbyists, a couple thousand in Washington, to lobby for specific defense spending, like the The F-35 for Lockheed Martin is built in 45 states. It's the most expensive weapon system in human history. And the operational readiness of the aircraft, 29%.
Huh.
Fully mission capable, 29% can fly right now.
So 2/3 of them is just junk.
Down for maintenance.
Yeah.
That's bad. That is not great value for the taxpayer. So look, in the Clinton administration, there used to be 100-ish major defense contractors. They pushed it, consolidated down to 5. Boeing, Lockheed, Northrop, Raytheon, General Dynamics. They need to be broken up because that cartel, right? They really control the bidding. Some will bid on some will bid on others. It's a joke how non-competitive most of those bids are. And the way Pentagon procurement works is everybody that has a great idea develops a new thing in their basement or their garage with 3 of their friends. The procurement process is so slow that they get choked off. So they get those mid-level good idea guys get squashed and bought for pennies by the big guys who then resell it. For example, the drone that was used largely by the U.S. in the War on Terror was originally developed for tuna fishing. Fantastic. Some innovative guys in Washington State, the Pacific Northwest, built a thing that launched off the top of their fishing boat and they would recover on a cable. Fantastic. Boeing bought it, charged 5 times as much per aircraft. Come on.
I mean, I'm Jewish myself. I've been to Israel multiple times, and I really hate the conflict that's happening right now in Israel with Hamas. And I put the blame on both sides.
I hate the conflicts too.
Yeah, I hate the fact that the Hamas attack happened and, over 1,000 people got killed and kidnapped. I also hate the heavy-handed response that's killing civilians and so forth. If you were in charge of that operation, do you think you could actually end it? Or do you think that this just goes back to biblical times and it'll never end?
I knew, look, I had an idea of the kind of fight that Hamas wanted to have, and they built 500 kilometers of tunnels, 300 miles, all under Gaza. And I knew the IDF was going to have a problem with that. And I knew the civilians were going to suffer if there's a whole bunch of urban combat trying to bomb into those tunnels. So I went in November last year. I had donors lined up, and I had the best drilling technology from Texas. Horizontal drilling technology to what? To sit outside, horizontally drill into those tunnels, flood it with seawater.
Just destroy all the tunnels.
Take away the sea, right.
Yeah.
Destroy the underground weapons caches with no bombs. Take away their ability to maneuver with no bombs. Flush hostages and terrorists out of the tunnels with no bombs. So you at least even the playing field and make it much less likely that you have to bomb in a civilian area to hasten their ability to resolve the conflict and especially protect civilians. Because look, it is a bad look to kill civilians at that level. I understand the IDF has to finish Hamas. Another Condi Rice move. She was the one that decided we should have a free election in Gaza. And they elected Hamas.
Yeah, exactly.
Look, anytime you lock up people in a small area and they don't have freedom of maneuver and freedom to trade, they're gonna scheme and come up with a way to lash back.
Yeah.
And so all that productive energy that could have been done into making a better product or a better thing,
better society,
was instead innovated to destroy their border wall and to kill as many Israelis as possible. It's really tragic.
Yeah, I mean, it essentially became an open air prison. And like I said, I feel that the problem is on both sides. And I hope at some point in my lifetime there will be a solution because my entire life, Israel and Palestine have been killing each other. And I don't see an end to it, unfortunately.
And a lot of that is stimulated by Iran.
Once again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Iran in Lebanon, Iran in Gaza, and Iran in Iraq. And Iran in Yemen. And the Houthis, they have shut down a major waterway. The next country that's at risk because of that is Egypt. They're losing $800 million a month just because the Suez is largely shut down. They're losing toll fees.
Huh.
And Egypt can't really afford that. The Egyptian pound has already fallen by half of value because of that.
Well, there was rumors that you plan on taking the Venezuelan government down with mercenaries.
That's a little strong.
Explain it.
I've paid attention to Venezuela for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big fan of Hernando de Soto, a great economist who talks about how to build free, equitable, wealth-generating societies based on private property, land rights, the basic rungs of capitalism. And Venezuela voted in socialism in the late 90s, Chavez.
Yeah.
And now the Chavismo government, Maduro, has stolen the last 3 elections. This time, the opposition won with 70% of the vote. Clearly, they have the receipts. 70%, 30%, not even close. And they're just stealing it. And so I have been vocal. I trolled Maduro on Twitter. And I posted, if the Biden administration wants actual justice and democracy in Venezuela, they should up the bounty on Maduro. Because there's a U.S. DEA bounty, a warrant for his arrest for $15 million for drug trafficking. On the Minister of Interior there, Diosdado Cabello, $10 million wanted by the DEA for drug trafficking. I said they should raise those bounties to $100 million apiece, and they could use frozen Venezuelan government funds. Raise the bounty, sit back, watch the magic happen.
Well, weren't you involved in Operation Gideon?
What is that?
It was a failed operation where a mercenary corporation was hired on behalf of the Venezuelan opposition leader, Juan Guaido, to assassinate President Maduro.
Not me at all.
Not true.
Nothing to do.
Okay,
Nope.
yeah, because there's some articles about this saying you were part of this.
Lots of idiots typing from their basement that don't know what
this
the
is why
hell
I'm
they're
asking
talking
the source right now. Well, you actually have a new product called Unplugged Phone.
We do.
Okay.
And it was actually a result of the 2020 election.
Okay.
But seeing what big tech was doing
right.
in shutting down platforms, certain apps, I would say impairing free speech.
Is that one of the phones right there?
This is one of the phones.
Okay.
This is an unplugged phone.
I mean, it looks like an iPhone.
Same camera.
Okay. But when you turn around, it's not an iPhone.
It's our hardware.
Okay.
Our operating system.
Ah.
The difference is an iPhone or a Google mobile services running Android collects all of your data. They know where you go, what you buy, who you call, what you browse.
So this is your own OS, basically.
Correct.
Aha,
And
okay.
our operating system doesn't have an ad ID. So on the other guys' phones, their ad ID turns on and cooperates with those apps to collect all that information on you and export it to sell to advertisers. This is the antidote to that. It prevents all of that from happening. It's the first phone with a actual firewall that you can hard off. The camera, the microphone, the touch to pay, all those things, so you know it's actually off. It even has a kill switch that separates the battery from the electronics, so that off is fully off.
So you can't track it at all once it's off?
Correct.
Aha. Okay. Do you worry about the phone being used by the cartels and various other bad guys as well?
Look, there's lots of ways that people can use sophisticated technology to try to do that. This is designed for free people to be able to communicate freely, because I think it's the kind of the prerequisite to people to live in a republic is they have to communicate freely and have their data be their data. The really troubling thing is the FISA extension, Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. Congress extended it to now any federal government agent can go to any company that has data off your cell phone or off your cell phone and say, turn it over to me with no probable cause and no warrant.
Yeah, I mean,
that's frightening. That is the antithesis of the First and the Fourth Amendments. This is the antidote to that. And we're selling now. So we did 500 units last fall as a beta test, got our first 10,000 units in May, and we just reordered another 10,000. You can order at unplugged.com.
Yeah, I mean, I assume when using my phone, every actual voice call is recorded somewhere and stored. I assume every text message is recorded somewhere and stored, every email. So I'm aware of it.
There's a reason that
I've just accepted it at this point.
I haven't.
Okay, that's why you built that. And it's $989.
There's a reason that Mark Zuckerberg paid $20 billion for WhatsApp, because every message, call, picture, voice note that passes through there is analyzed by their algorithm.
Yeah, exactly.
I learned that when I managed to piss off my wife, and she sent me a scorcher of a message on WhatsApp. And for the next 2 weeks, she's getting advertising from divorce lawyers and from Match.com. Not with Unplugged.
A final question before I let you go. I've interviewed a few billionaires over the years. Grant Cardone, he made his...
And you're not one today. Because
I'm not
far
one
from
today,
it.
no. Well, Grant Cardone made his billions in real estate. I've interviewed Vivek, who ran for president. He made his money through,
healthcare,
biotech,
and
healthcare and so forth. According to the internet, you're worth $2 billion.
Once again, the internet is grotesquely off. I wish that was the case, but that is definitely not the case.
Okay, so it's not that number.
No.
What about $1 billion? Would you say you're worth that?
Way less.
Way less.
Look, I got crushed. I got crushed by 14 years of cancel culture, getting denied capital from banks, from loans, all the rest. Look, boohoo, I'm not starving, but I am worth way less than I was when I decided to serve my country. Literally, it would have been better for me to take this proceeds of the sale of my dad's business, put it in municipal bonds, and go to the golf course. Maybe that's the lesson, is don't serve your country, because they'll fuck you for it.
Well, right, because Blackwater paid the highest per capita fine in State Department history.
$42 million.
$42 million.
For actually no damage to national security that they acknowledged in their report. What do they fine us for? For illegally exporting body armor, helmets, zip ties. Why? For a protective team working for the State Department, U.S. Embassy people overseas, while the Bureau of Defense Trade Controls doesn't process the licenses fast enough. Diplomatic security needs people from us. We send them without the license complete, because I'm not sending guys naked into a combat zone. Yeah, and they fucked us for it.
I mean, do you think you'd be worth $2 billion if you were able to sell Blackwater for what it was actually?
Yeah, sure. Yep.
Yeah. You're not starving these days, so.
I'm not starving. But it's been an interesting ride. And look, and for perspective, I got screwed financially. Veterans lost lives, mental health, limbs, spouses, families. They pay a vastly higher price.
Yeah.
And that's bullshit. And I take great issue with politicians that send people to war in a half-assed way. If you're going to do that, there is no place for half measures. Get it done. And we have politicians that make decisions that they never have to bear the bad consequences for. And that must change.
Well, Erik Prince, I appreciate you coming in. Definitely one of the most fascinating interviews I've ever had. To have someone that really functioned in the military at the highest levels with a private company that you built from scratch. And like you said, you could have taken the money from your dad's company when you guys sold it, put it in the S&P 500, and you'd be a multi-billionaire right now. Absolutely. Without even a question. But you chose to reinvest into something that you were actually passionate about.
I close with, I guess, my proudest professional moment was speaking at the National War College in Washington. So there's 300 colonels. I got out of the Navy. I was like an 03. I was a lieutenant.
Yeah.
All these guys popped to attention, and they, one of the guys came up to me afterwards, and he said, he just came back from brigade command in Baghdad. And he said at the top of his guys' dashboards of the Humvees were the Blackwater call signs and frequencies, because they knew that if they got in trouble, the Blackwater guys would come for them. No question. That's the reputation we wanted to have.
Well, Erik, man, I appreciate everything you talked about today. Clearly an inspiration for generations to come. And I think this is one of the most important interviews that I've ever done. Appreciate you coming in.
Thanks for having me, Vlad.
Peace.